this is Jenny from Just Being Me, and you're listening to the Learning to Love Yourself podcast, the show that inspires you to put yourself first.
Learning to love yourself on the path to happiness. Learning to love yourself on the path to happiness.
Welcome back to the podcast, and today I'm with the very lovely Laura Teare-Jones, and she's here to tell us a little bit about her self-care journey. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. What was it that brought you to realizing that you need to do something about your self-care?
I think there was a moment actually when I realized that I had a lot of unlearning to do about how I was treating myself.
Okay.
And I'd just been diagnosed with my condition, PMDD. And I realized
For
that,
those who don't know, sorry, Laura, what's PMDD stand for?
so that's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And that's a cyclical hormone-based mood disorder, which 1 in 20. So the best way for me to describe that really is if you were to take something like PMS and blow it up, then you'd get something that kind of represents PMDD. So it comes with very severe psychological symptoms, emotional symptoms, and physical symptoms that last for around 2 weeks of every menstrual cycle. So it's, it's a lot to live with. Yeah.
Mm.
And I wasn't diagnosed with that until I was 28. So up until that point, from the time that my period started, I was living with this, not knowing why, not knowing why I was always so emotional. And then all of a sudden I was okay. No connection was ever made between my periods and my mental health. And then when I finally learned about it and got my diagnosis, I was kind of like, so this isn't my fault. After all, I'm not overdramatic. I'm not spoiled. I'm not attention seeking. But as well as that, I also learned that I was living with a very serious, very valid health condition. And so I have to look after myself. Like, this is serious.
That's a lot to take on, isn't it, suddenly at 28? Because you've probably done 15 years of believing. So I'm guessing those beliefs came from other people to start off with, that, you're being dramatic and all of those sorts of beliefs. I'm guessing that came from other people, which then put that thought process in your mind. So was that part of the unlearning?
I guess in a way, because I don't think people were really saying that I was being dramatic or anything like that. But I think as a teenager, you do compare yourself to your friends. And what I knew is that they weren't going through what I was going through. And I also knew that I had no reason to be feeling the way I did, and I knew that the life that I was living was okay. It wasn't like I was living with a lot of trauma. I didn't have a bad upbringing. So why do I feel like this? And I think the easy thing to do is blame yourself, but then also mask it. Yeah. And so people didn't really comment because they didn't really know what was going on.
Wow. So you were very good at masking all of that then, because that must have been, coming from somebody that has had quite a few issues with her cycle, not to in any way to the extent that you have. But I know dealing with that was not easy. And you're right. I think about it now and think, yeah, you just mask it. Especially as women mask a lot of what's going on for them in that direction anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But then I think if the norm, if you like, is for us to mask how we're feeling as women, and for me, I just thought I was being dramatic. In my head, I think I wasn't aware that I was masking, but I guess in a way, I probably just thought, this is what you do. And you keep these things in and you don't share them. Because you don't want to be seen as all those things that you think you are, like dramatic and all those kinds of things.
So what did you do then to support yourself?
I think the first thing that I did when I got diagnosed was I guess before the diagnosis, but when I got the awareness of PMDD and I learned about it thanks to social media. So I knew there and then, having that moment of, wow, there's a name for this. I knew I had to get a diagnosis because that would validate how I'd been feeling. And I know that it shouldn't take a diagnosis to give me that validation. But at the same time, I think when you've been living for such a long time, questioning your own mentality and your own mindset, that diagnosis was really important. But also it was to get on a pathway for treatment, because I guess in my naivety, I kind of thought, well, now there's a name for it, I'll be able to get treatment and I'll be cured and it'll be wonderful. And
it's all simple, isn't it?
And unfortunately, there isn't a cure for PMDD, and it did take me a long time to get the right treatment for me. But putting that treatment, that medical treatment in place, has given me the foundation to bring in the other self-care building blocks, if you like. Because the thing about PMDD is you can have 2 weeks where you put in all the self-care, you do all of the things that we know are going to make us feel good. But PMDD will hit regardless. And so for me, the treatment pathway of medication has meant that those building blocks don't just get washed away when PMDD hits. It means that I've got a bit of stability, I guess, so that I can continue with the self-care and really get the benefits of that.
So what is your self-care? Do you have like a daily self-care routine that you up when you need to?
Yeah, I guess my self-care really is more of an approach than action specific. And what I mean by that is I tend to try and live cyclically, as you know, lots of people do. So for anyone who's not really familiar with that, it just means living in alignment with the ebbs and flows of your fluctuating hormones. So in every phase of our menstrual cycle, we have strengths and we have challenges, and that's no different for a person with PMDD. So the luteal phase, as it's known, is really difficult for a person with PMDD. But that doesn't mean that we don't still have our strengths. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that. And so for me, yeah, it is just about kind of trying to live cyclically and meet myself where I am throughout my menstrual cycle, as opposed to every day needing to look the same, because what I know is my body is different every single day.
And I think that's true for all of us, though, isn't it? You know, actually, we go through I have a Just Being Me cycle tracker, and, you know, because I want to be clear here, it's not just women that go through a cycle.
No, absolutely.
My husband uses our energy tracker, and he identifies the times of the month where he feels he's got much more energy than other times, you know, that he feels stronger at this moment in time. And so everybody benefits from being able to live with that, knowing what your cycle is.
Absolutely. And I think this is so important and so refreshing to hear this, because I think sometimes we forget that, you know, our bodies are like constantly changing, and there are so many other factors at play as well. And, you know, seasons of the year even have an impact. So it's just about understanding your body. And I'm a huge advocate of tracking your cycle, your menstrual cycle, tracking your symptoms, how you feel every day. Because it gives us that body awareness. It's not just about, you know, tracking so that you can get a diagnosis or whatever it might be. It's tracking so you understand your body and can have a better relationship with it, and you know how to get the best out of it. So I know that when I'm in my really harder days, that means that I'm less sociable, but it also means that I'm more creative. And so for me with my business, that's great, because it means I can be doing all the behind the scenes work in my business. I'm not going to be with my clients as much, but that's okay, because every day has value.
That's a really interesting thing, because having identified where my energy predominantly, because, you know, there are ebbs and flows with these things, but predominantly for me, when I'm coming up to a new moon, I'm like Bugs Bunny on speed. You know, I have got that much energy that I can do all sorts of things. So that's when I like to do my high energy stuff, because I can do it without even thinking about it. And yet at another point in the month, I'm like, how do I even get through this day? You know, because my energy is much lower. So knowing that, I use my diary now, and I make sure that on the higher days, I've got plenty of space to be able to do all these things. And then on the lower days, I make sure that I work a little less, because I know things are going to take me a lot longer to do. And by doing that, I get the space to live my life in the way that I need to live it, which is easy for me to say as a self-employed person.
Yes.
Because I can change my diary around.
Yeah. And this is why I call it an approach. So to say that I live cyclically, straight away, I feel like that's a place of pressure, because I'm kind of like, even as a self-employed person with a fairly autonomous diary, it's not 100%, because as you said, our body does ebb and flow, and it's a science, but it's not always an exact science. And sometimes your body will do the opposite of what you think it will. And as soon as we start to feel like we have to get it right, or we have to try and forecast how we're going to feel, that can put a bit too much pressure on sometimes, can't it? So we have to do it with an openness that actually it might not pan out as we think it will.
I have to say, yeah. I mean, as much, because I do use my diary, and my diary is my thing, because I'm ADHD as well. So my diary is the thing that keeps me on the straight and narrow. But, there are some times, and then it's a matter of going, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
If this hasn't panned out as I wanted it to. And because I look at life like that, and a lot of the times now where I would have been in a space of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, panic. And now I sit there and I laugh and I go, oh, well, obviously that wasn't the plan for today. The universe has sent me into a different direction. What do you like to do? What lights you up? What creates you getting a bit more energy?
I love just like, but there's nothing for me. I just love the idea of bringing people together and celebrating and supporting each other. So that's me. And I guess living with purpose has really helped me, from a PMDD perspective, to use that as something that I can support people with. But not just that, it's knowing that I'm doing something that helps. I don't know how to describe this. It's kind of like knowing that my PMDD, as awful as it is, and as much as I'd never wish it on anybody, knowing that it's helped me to live with purpose really does give me satisfaction, I guess. And it's not, don't get me wrong, if you're asking me what I do for fun, that's a different question. But in terms of helping to keep me lit up and keeping my cup full, if you like, it's living with purpose, knowing that I can have a positive impact on the world, and knowing that I can have a positive influence, if that makes sense. Does that just sound really cheesy?
It's a really interesting thing, because I had this conversation with somebody the other day, in the fact, actually, one of the things for me that is part of my self-care is speaking to my clients, is speaking to people like you, because I love those conversations. And because I love those conversations, it fills my cup up. And so somebody said to me the other day about the fact that, they're unhappy because they're in a job they don't like. So my answer is get another job, because you're not tied to that job. Do something that lights you up. If you have an amazing hobby that you just go to work for and get home for your hobby, and so therefore work is just a means to an end and you don't really think too much about it, then that's okay. But actually, if you're going to work and being seriously unhappy, then change your job, because you have a choice.
Totally agree.
No reason why you cannot change your job, because we live in a world where people do move around in jobs, and it's about setting that goal, isn't it, to do that. So you said that if I asked you what you did for fun, it's different from the self-care, which is interesting to me, because for me, part of what I do for fun is self-care. So what do you do for fun then, if it's different?
Well, this is even more cheesy, this answer. Come
on, let's do the cheese.
Yeah. The simple things, like going to the zoo with my daughter, is just I love doing that. That for me is kind of, if I can have a mummy and Joy day, her name's Joy, it's just
that's lovely.
It's just, that again, it's just, seeing the world through her eyes and being so amazed by the animal. That does make me really happy. So anything like that is just gorgeous. But then equally, if I'm being totally honest, that's her fun, not mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Love it for her. but I probably wouldn't go to the zoo if it wasn't for that. There's that kind of, this is going to sound so wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like adult fun, meaning that, but just kind of like going out and having fun and taking the mum off. I find that incredibly fun. Going out with my friends where we can just have a couple of drinks and have some food, and you don't have to be thinking about, making sure she's fed, making sure she's sorted, and not having to have that kind of responsible hat on for a bit. I think, being a parent, again, it is fun and I do love it, but it's very responsible. And being a business owner, it's very fun and I love it, but it's also responsible.
Yeah.
I think sometimes for me, fun just means taking off the responsibility hats for a little bit and just being a bit silly. And yeah, that to me is what fun is.
I have to say, my husband and I went away for a couple of days, and we were very lucky, and we hit that really beautiful period in the UK earlier on this year. And actually doing silly things like running down the hill in the field, when you do that as a child, I couldn't quite get to the point where I was going to roly-poly down it, which is what I really wanted to do, because I'm thinking there's sheep in this field and there's cows in this field, and I'm really not quite sure what's going on here. But, as a child, that wouldn't have worried me. But, but I was running down the hill and thinking to myself, this is just so free. This is just so freeing, not having to have that adult head on.
Yeah.
Where we always think about the consequences, the responsibilities, and, what happens if, and, it's just so freeing, isn't it? Just to go, let's take the responsibility head off for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, live life,
That is.
Do you find that life changes for you because we do spend so much time on screens these days?
Yeah. How do you mean life changes?
Well, in the fact that actually, do you find that you don't do so many things that light you up because there's a screen? Because we all have a tendency. We were walking down the road the other day and said, oh, it's very quiet. And suddenly we realized that's because no children were out in the street. And it was kind of like we joke going, they're all at home with their screens, and here we are sitting on screens, So do you find that you spend more time on a screen rather than actually going outside and that sort of thing? Does that affect you?
It's a good point. I'm trying to think what we did before we worked from home. And actually, I was probably still looking at a screen, but just in an office. But I guess I was still surrounded by people, whereas now I'm not. And actually, I quite like the solitude because I am a very sociable person. Like I said before, I love bringing people together and all of that. But I think like everyone, have a social battery. And so sometimes actually it is nice, especially if you've been out quite a lot or you've done a lot of kind of work outings or social outings. I think actually it's quite nice to have the choice between the two and to be able to say, do you know what, today I'm just going to be me and my laptop in my house, in my comfies. I'm not having to get dressed up and put makeup on and show up the same. And actually I quite like it. I like having the choice. I think if my job was only online, I think I would go a bit stir crazy. But I also think that if I was in a job where I was always out or always going to another venue, I don't think I could cope with that. I think I would burn out pretty quick. Well, I know I would because I tried it and it didn't work for me. Here we are.
So I was going to ask, have you chosen to work in the way that you do, or was it presented to you?
I think so. I worked in corporate for a long time. After uni, I went kind of from corporate job to corporate job, finance, legal, all that kind of stuff. And none of them really worked for me. And none of them were, bad jobs. But I just remember always feeling like rubbish and then always looking for like the next thing. And then I just remember one day just being like, this isn't for me. Like, I can't do it. I feel like I get to the end of the week, I'm drained. I feel like every few weeks I'm having migraines and I have to show up in the same way every single day in my job because that's what it expects of me. And this was before COVID. So there was no kind of working from home or, hybrid working or anything like that. But I just remember thinking, this is really difficult. And so I left that world and became a weight loss coach for a while, which I loved. But one of the best things about it was basically you did morning workshops and you did evening workshops, which meant that you had your afternoons. So it was actually quite nice that I could spend my afternoons, whether that be napping if I needed to have a nap, whether it be doing things that I really enjoyed or, having fun, or doing more kind of the responsible stuff, just having that break in between in the middle of my working day, essentially. And that's when I started to realize that actually work didn't have to look like, the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 that I'd assumed it had to look like. And I think as time's gone on, I've got more and more autonomous, but also more and more kind of, I can choose what my week looks like. I can choose to spend more time at my laptop if I want to, or to enjoy more sociable times. And again, I can definitely kind of sync that with where I am in my cycle, because that works really well for me. But what I do know is I could probably never go back to, I don't know if it's working for somebody else who expects me to show up in the same way, or going to, being in an employed role where, you have to behave in a certain way and you don't have the same autonomy, because I do think I need that for my health.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people actually, they prefer the structure of that, don't they? And they like to stand.
And each to their own. And thank goodness we're all different,
Well, absolutely. And I'm not saying like, oh, everyone should be self-employed or, I'm not saying that at all. But I know for me, what works best is having this kind of hybrid role that I've imposed on myself.
And it's an interesting one because of the fact that I do spend 90% of my life sitting on a screen, talking to clients, talking to people, working on the screen, doing all the marketing and all the stuff that's behind that. And to combat the fact that I don't get enough people, I one day a week go and work in a shop, because I can have 3D people and that gives me enough people, and I do half a day's volunteering, because it gives me people. And then I can come back to a screen, but I can actually have 3D people and I can be around people, but like you, I get to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm all peopled out now. I'm glad I'm going to just be doing a screen today. It makes such a difference to be able to do that for yourself, doesn't it? To make those decisions for yourself.
Exactly.
So we talked a lot about your work. So tell us actually what you do now.
So I guess I call myself a hormone and mindset coach predominantly. So obviously with my diagnosis, PMDD, I've said before, I've had to do so much learning and unlearning about not just the menstrual cycle, but also about mental health and about myself. And I've had to learn self-compassion over everything. And that is now my top value, self-compassion over everything else, because it has to be. And so as a hormone and mindset coach, my role isn't to try and fix anyone's hormones or anything like that. My role is really to support people who live with what I call hormone habit. So that could be that they're living with PMDD and they just don't know kind of what to do about it. They don't know what treatment pathways to explore. It could be that somebody is menopausal and they're feeling like they've lost their sense of identity. Or it could be somebody who is wanting to live a bit more cyclically and in line with their hormones. So I do that kind of work. And a lot of the people who I work with have some form of hormone habit, shall we say. But I think the one thing that they do all have in common is that they do struggle with their self-compassion. And they might have goals. They might have goals in their business. They might have goals in their personal life, in their relationships, in their career. But none of those goals really are going to be sustainable if they're not happening from a place of self-compassion. Because I always think if you're not working from self-compassion, you're working from punishment or obligation. And so our actions start become unaligned and we start putting a lot of pressure on ourselves, and that just doesn't work long term. So for me, it's all about helping people to live a bit more compassionately so that they can achieve what matters most to them.
And it's really interesting when you go down that path, isn't it, as to what you realise, because I do exactly the same as you. We're working with the fact that we need to look after ourselves and we need to be compassionate towards ourselves. And when you go down that line, how your life changes completely for what you believe is important.
Yes, absolutely.
Because peace of mind becomes far more important than anything else. And I now can feel if I'm getting slightly out of sync and I'm like, oh, not in that direction, you know, and I will create my life so that it works around supporting me, which has the knock-on effect of supporting the people around, because I'm in a really good place and therefore my energy's high and I'm working with them and I'm around them, and that rubs off on other people. And it's an amazing place to be, isn't it? Once you get that working okay, life, it's a game changer, isn't it?
That's such a great place to be. And I think, you know, I will often ask my clients, like, how do you want to feel? And they go, well, what do you mean, how do I want to feel? You know, it's like I'm trying to trip them up.
Yeah.
And they go, I just want to feel like content. And it's always that word content that they use. And it's kind of like, okay, so we're all after like the same thing here. We're all after, you know, the simple life. We're not after like anything magical. We're not after anything unrealistic. We just want to be content, to be happy. And whether we do that through the medium of starting our own business or whether we do that through the medium of something else, great, do it, go for it. Work on whatever matters most to you and how you want to feel. That's it.
And the wonderful thing is it's your choice.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, you get to choose, and that's just amazing, isn't it? Laura, it's been amazing chatting to you today. Thank you so much. We will put all of your social links down below so that if people want to get in touch with you, they can, because I think it's really important, because I think women do go through so much in their lives that is just expected to be dealt with and not really worried about, you know, and I'm talking more and more to people with perimenopause symptoms, you know, that actually they're identified as perimenopause symptoms, and therefore, if I've identified it, I can do something about it, you know. And I think it's more and more important for it not to be hidden away. So anybody out there got any issues, get in touch with Laura, please do. Thank you, Laura. Hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
The next new moon is just around the corner. And new moons are all about new beginnings and new goals. So it's the perfect time to download my new moon vision board and identify what you would like to achieve this new moon phase. Click the link below. Thanks for listening today. If you'd like to know more, you can find all the links down below. Oh, and don't forget to press subscribe so you can catch the next one. See you soon.